All right, well, welcome back. We are going to now be doing the full moon through the balsamic moon, and we'll be bringing in C here coming up pretty quick. So just to kind of recap where we're at right now, it's good to look back at this whole thing anyway. So what you kind of want to remember about this is it's a cycle. So it's sort of, this flowing, the whole idea of the flowing river and that whole ancient idea of Heraclitus, you can't step in the same river twice, really applies here. This thing is always moving and it's always changing. And when you're born at whatever lunation phase you're born is when you sort of enter this. And so going back to that new moon, the new moon is, you have to always remember it's coming out of the dark moon. And so that new moon it's dark. It's unconscious, it's at seed germination, something's emerging. And then as we talked about already, then crescent moon, and remember you hit the sextile in that crescent moon, it's becoming more clear now. You have to though persist. You have to look around for support and resources. You don't want to give up. It could still be a difficult time. Things might not be showing up the way you want them to, but you need to make sure you persist, look around to see what can support you. You come into the first quarter moon. You really at this point need to be building structures. Anything that's not working out, you need to address and take care of. You also want to have compassion for yourself and other people going through this phase, because it just tends to be crises happening, things that are really difficult. It's not like everything being difficult. It's not actually even your fault or the person's fault. There tends to be a time where a lot of things are just happening. You have to respond to it, and you want to encourage people to, earlier in the new moon crescent moon, you want to be trying lots of different things. In this phase, you're still taking action, trying things, but you need to really be building solid structures and supports for yourself. And then as you come into the gibbous moon, that's the budding. And just to remember again that, it's the bud, it's not the full flower yet. So things are not quite flowering yet. You're really perfecting things, fine-tuning things, evaluating things. You're still gaining skills. There's still more stuff to be learning. It's a good time to learn something very specific. I used the example actually with evolutionary astrology. This is right. I went into this phase and I learned that from Jeff Green and the other people on the EA message board thread. And it's just a good example of that. So then where we're at now is the full moon phase. So what we're going to talk about now is full moon and then the waning half of the cycle. So again, looking at this graphic, just you want to keep in mind this idea of a cycle of growth. And so it's not just things keep growing, exponentially forever expanding. Things grow, they reach a peak, and then they start waning. And then, there's creation and destruction, there's growth, there's decomposition, there's shedding, and intensifying of things. The waning, going around this, going into the disseminating is when you start. The full moon is finding the meaning of the cycle, and you're starting to bear fruit. You're starting to come into what's going to be the harvest out of this cycle. What's the meaning out of this cycle? And so you are then stepping into that meaning, embodying that meaning, sharing that meaning with other people. So yeah, we could go back then to that full moon slide if you want. So again, what you're doing at this full moon is coming into the meaning of the whole cycle. And again, it is a peak of the cycle. So things might happen where things are just going great for you. But if you're in a full moon, you feel like, you're not getting all the fame and fortune or whatever that you really thought you were going to have or whatever. It's really all about finding the meaning of everything. And everything doesn't go perfectly fine at this phase. I mean, there can definitely be major disappointments, but they're really powerful learning experiences. There's really powerful meaning you come into in this phase. You also could do something dramatic like changing a job. And like I said before, if things aren't working well in a way, you can, it's a good time to actually start over, go in a different direction. But the thing about this, instead of the new moon where you're just kind of trying different things, it's not very clear. At this full moon phase, things are much more clear. There's a lot of self-realization involved in this. It's great for objectifying, clarifying one's life purpose, working through conflicting desires. You know, Rudyard uses that term, the repolarization of consciousness. You're seeing your circumstances in their full light. And again, it can involve, you know, getting more acclaim or getting noticed more, that sort of thing. Also with full moons, you know, relationships might become really important, or a very significant relationship comes into your life during this phase. I don't know, were we going to show the example chart for this one? I know at some point you were going to. Is that this one? Because I can talk briefly about that. Yeah, okay. So I think that's actually my chart with where it is right now. And so if you look at this, where I actually am on this, and what you'd see on this chart, it's not actually the full moon. This is where I am, I think, right now, which is actually the very end of the full moon. I'm preparing to go into the disseminating phase. I think I go into it in November, actually, like a month or two from now. So I am at the end of the full moon phase. So what you can notice though, where Linda has that one arrow with my sun, I'm a progressed Taurus sun, which of course being a Pisces is very significant. And that's always something to be paying attention to. And so where I had my full moon was Scorpio, and it was back there more at about 4 degrees of Scorpio, which you can see is it's kind of close to my Uranus in Scorpio. And so it was a full moon that, you know, you could say had a Uranian kind of thing going on with it. So that's one thing that you can always look at it with it. And then, you know, I could also be thinking about in terms of with my chart, you know, what's the Taurus to Scorpio polarity. And then also, it's not just the Scorpio moon, because within this full moon phase, I went through having a Scorpio progressed moon into the Sagittarius progressed moon. And the way my chart works out, it just kind of works out this way that right now you can see my progressed moons on my descendant, which is pretty significant, but that's just, you know, happens to be the way it works out in my chart. And then just as far as what we were talking about before about this cycle, so it's like something I didn't mention with the gibbous moon phase, I should have actually, was actually when, probably one of the better examples was, that's when I actually started my blog and my website, and I started writing about astrology. And pretty much the day of this, right when this full moon happened, Taurus Scorpio was probably one of my first things I posted on that, where a lot of people actually read it. And it was actually even about Taurus. And people started contacting me for readings off of that. So I didn't become like this famous person during this phase, but I did with, as far as working on astrology over time, I was coming into developing my own way of working in astrology, and how am I going to approach astrology? How am I going to be my own writing of astrology? How am I going to put myself out there with astrology? And then also with my, I talked before, my children being born in the new moon phase. My daughters are teenagers now, so they're more independent. I actually switched jobs from teaching into child protective services, which is what I do here. And it's in Olympia where I live, before I was actually commuting. And so, but there's actually been a lot more, this full moon phase for me has had a lot of focus outside of my work in actually astrology and putting myself out there more. And as I'm coming into this disseminating phase, I'm actually coming into a period where I'm doing a lot of teaching and classes, and I'm going to probably be moving most likely into just doing a lot more with my work in astrology. Also with meaning, you can even look at in astrology, you know, I really shifted from just doing, I learned evolutionary astrology, but in this phase, I really opened myself up to learning more ancient techniques, Hellenistic astrology and traditional astrology, and going well beyond evolutionary astrology, and then learning how am I gonna do this, and how am I gonna synthesize all this together and use all of those things at once, which is what I do, whereas some people are kind of doing one or the other. So, and also had a very significant relationship that came in during this phase, which not only about myself, but really kind of coalesced a lot of meaning, understanding for me about it really has been a phase where all these different things I've been interested in and exploring about myself and the world have kind of all been coalescing and deepening my understanding. So then what you do is you go into the disseminating moon phase. And so that's, you know, where I'm going now. And we'll hopefully be able to backtrack. When we get to Sue, we'll hopefully be able to talk about her and, you know, what she went through at this point. So when you go into the disseminating phase, sort of what I'm describing, you know, I've developed more like, what do I want to do? Let's just use my astrology example. I figured out more, you know, what kind of astrology do I do? How do I write about astrology? How do I talk about astrology? Now going into this phase, it's like, I'm going to go out and teach this to people and share this with people. So when you go into the disseminating moon phase, that's going from the flowering kind of into the fruiting. And now you have these fruits of the cycle to share with people. And yeah, do you want to go to, do you want to go to that one slide? I think it's, I can't wait for you to jump on there if you want. Yeah. So, you know, you're going out and sharing what you've been learning and, you know, embodying it, teaching it, all these values that you've been coming into. And as you're doing that, the other important point is, as you're going out and expressing all this meaning you've been developing for yourself with other people, you know, other people are talking to you. There's this idea of the cross-pollination of ideas and thoughts from other people. And as you're sharing what you know, other people are sharing what they know. And this kind of starts taking us into that next phase, which is the last quarter phase. And at the last quarter phase, there can be sort of this reevaluation, reorientation of your beliefs. And that can kind of sometimes come out of that disseminating phase and going around and sharing things with people. Also in the disseminating phase, if there's been things you haven't really been paying attention to enough, when you hit that last quarter square, again, you're coming into a square. So that's where there could be sort of a rude awakening of some sort. You know, you're kind of going along and things are going this one way, but something comes in that is really jolting coming in that last quarter square. But the general purpose of the disseminating phase, like I was mentioning, was, you know, going out in the community, sharing your passions, connecting with other people that share your passions with you. And then, you know, there's going to be people that disagree with you, and you're having to, you know, integrate that. So then, yeah, we can go to the last quarter moon. So this is another square, just like the first quarter square, but the really big difference is, just as Rudyard and Jeff Green works with it, the crisis in consciousness as opposed to the crisis in action. So it's a crisis more internal. It's a time of self-realization. So you've really at this point been achieving the purpose of that whole new moon. And you've been, during the disseminating phase, you've been acting out of that meaning you've been developing. This phase starts taking you on this journey of turning away from that past and beginning to reorient and prepare for the new vision that's coming. So it's a time of assimilating everything that's been going on in this entire cycle up until now. And so all these old structures are brought down at the same time that new ideas are developed, which are going to lead to the formation of new forms, new structures. You're going to have to often face really vital questions about who you are, what you want, how you're visualizing your future. And all the tests of courage you're facing, again, they're more about self-realization, as opposed to the first quarter phase can be more about, you know, you're just having to act and build things. And this is a little bit more about realizing things. It's also a time, though, that a lot of really important work can be done. So if you're somebody that's been on this path where things have really been developing, you come into all this meaning, when you hit this phase, instead of just being a total crisis, you could really be producing a really important work, or getting yourself to a place where you're doing something really big with all this meaning that you've been developing during this whole cycle. And so, but as you're moving through it, and we're kind of heading towards that last phase, which is the balsamic dark moon phase, there might be more feelings of disillusionment, this whole idea of re-evaluating, the whole idea of decomposition, this inner process kind of starting to take over, needing to refocus. These sorts of things are going to start coming up more and more. And then what we're going to be doing is moving into that last phase, which is the balsamic moon phase. So if you want to move on to that last one, Linda. Yeah, so this is the dark moon. So you're distilling the entire cycle. So it's a transition from the end of the cycle. So we're coming up on 26 years now of being in this cycle, taking us into this 29 and a half year mark. So you've been working on something at this point for 26 years or so. So it's a transition between the end of that previous cycle and this new cycle that's coming. So it's a time of release. It's a purifying time, a healing time, a time of renewal. It may not feel that way always. It may feel very dark and disillusioning and difficult at times. There could be many feelings of loss, experiences of loss, which really impact your sense of identity and your sense of purpose. You can even experience loss, literally loss of loved ones or relationships or jobs, things kind of just having to let go and pass away, shedding, destruction. But any destruction, shedding, it's all making space for new creation and growth. So you can also think about, people often use the analogy of weeding the garden during this phase. Everything going on, you're really ultimately clearing things out for this whole new 30-year phase cycle that's about to come into your life. But people often feel really confused during this time, alienated, depressed, lonely, feeling like they don't know where they're going or what's going on. So it's important to remember that it's a period that you really are receiving a new vision. And it's possible that you can develop a deeper relationship with yourself during this time as you pull away from all these old structures and activities. And you're starting to plant seeds though so it's also a reseeding time. And it is possible that, some sort of great work or ultimate culmination at the same time really could come in during this phase, because if you think about it, it's actually the end of this entire cycle. So everything in this past 28, 29 years is going into the cycle. So what you're producing during this time, at the same time as you're releasing and clearing stuff out, you also could really be producing something that's coming. And what you'll be producing at this time, though, would be really integrating the full meaning of this entire cycle. But it's just, you want to have compassion for anybody in this phase, because if they're not producing anything, that's actually would be appropriate, because it's also a time of clearing. And a lot of times, we don't always accept or encourage people to kind of go into this space, but it's sort of the sort of space that this phase is actually calling for in a lot of ways. So it's definitely an important thing to clue somebody into, that they're going through that at this time. So I don't know, Sue, if you just want to come in and share whatever you want about yourself. I think we even have Sue's chart here. Yeah, so if you look at Sue's chart here, and this is a really important point too I want to make sure I make, is that you can see that Sue's got a Scorpio progressed sun, and her progressed moon is also in Scorpio now. And so what always happens is, well, not always, because you could be at the end of the sign, but typically what would happen is most people, most of the time, will have a balsamic moon happening in the same sign that they have their progressed new moon in, which I'm guessing is what's the case with Sue. What you can also see going on with Sue's chart is it's not even just the sun there. She's got Mercury there. She's got Venus with her progressed sun right now too. She even has Juno right where her progressed moon is right now as part of this balsamic moon phase. So we could, where she's at this right now, you clearly could pull in this idea of Sun, Venus, and Scorpio, dark moon Juno in Scorpio. So, you know, there's an obvious Juno, Venus, dark moon, Scorpio thing happening there. Even more so because Sue has a Scorpio Mars. So that's in that area. It looks like she also has a Scorpio Pallas Athena, which I'm somebody that would bring that in. So you definitely could. And then even her vertex is sort of in that area. So the vertex being there too, definitely looks clearly like you would just say from the outside without knowing anything. There must be something going on around relationships, you know, Venus, love, Juno, you know, Scorpio, some really deep things going on. And then you furthermore can connect this in with, this is all happening in Sue's 5th house. And so, of course, and obviously you can bring in everything else in a chart, but if we're just, that's just sort of like a starting point of looking at some of the obvious aspects that's going on in this balsamic moon. So, yeah, Sue, is there anything, I don't know, whatever you'd like to share about anything that might relate to this?
Well, first of all, everything you say I can relate to, and the phases and all that. You want me to speak to the balsamic phase specifically?
Sure, yeah, if you'd like to, or you can go, if you want to go back a little bit to another phase and tell us how it connects to now, that would be great too. Whatever would be better for you.
Okay, well, okay, so the new moon, my last progressed new moon was in Libra, conjunct my Neptune. And right at that time, I started a relationship that was very Neptunian, very Neptune and Libra, and it lasted up until approximately my progressed full moon. At that point, I did a geographic move 50 miles north. He did a geographic move 40 miles south. And but yet he kept saying we were going to get back together, and I kept saying no, we're not. And then as time went on, I also had started school. I was out of my job and had started school studying art, and as
was that in the full moon phase?
That was in the new moon.
Oh, okay.
No, it's actually the after the progressed square. No, after the progressed square, I got my degree in art, and I realized that I was no longer in love with my ex.
Okay.
About that same time, and then at the full moon, I also at that time between the new and last quarter square, I lost my home. I was on work comp and I lost my home. So at the next full moon, I bought a new home. Meanwhile, my son had progressed into Scorpio by that point. And right after I moved into my new home, I can't remember, my dog died and my mom died. And then this is not a country western song, but I think it could be. My progressed at the progressed square, the next progressed square, I could see my job evaporating, and I started. I knew that I had to prepare, and I was really unhappy at my job, and so I started doing things. I started. I got an astrology certificate. I started doing deep memory process. I became a Reiki master, and all of this, what I thought was in preparation for my new career. Let's see, what else is.
Did you say that was all at the last? That's kind of at the last quarter square.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
That was when all of it kind of came into my vision. It was after the last quarter square.
Yeah. Okay. So that does make sense.
Yeah, and I saw it happening, and I knew I had to prepare, knowing that it was coming.
Yeah, and I know I kind of was saying so, and that's a good example too of someone like, because it's not like everything at the disseminating is going to be. I mean, you sound like somebody that a lot happened at the full moon, and then leading into the, because at that last quarter, yeah, everything could kind of come full circle like that, like you're saying, and you had all those realizations, and then put it all into these forms like you're describing.
Yeah, and I was also born at a last quarter. Well,
Oh, okay.
disseminating. So I think I just kind of realized that I needed to, things were happening that I had to do something about, and I was able to start going to astrology conferences and prepare for what I thought was my new career, and I even did a self-employment training, and it hasn't quite materialized yet, but now I understand when you talk about the disseminating phase, why I'm, I do feel hopeful, but it's like it's so slow. I mean, it's like, I think, oh, well, okay, I'll get my website done. I'll do this. But I am doing readings, here and there. I give them, I give them away for fundraisers and stuff like that. So I know that I'm getting there. However, I did. I think it's being realized maybe in a different way, in that I've lost like 3 cats and a dog over the last year, but I started right after my dog died. I took a printmaking workshop and did a print of his ears, kind of memorializing him in art. And then that led to, and then I lost a couple more cats recently, and I've been kind of memorializing all of my dead cats in art, and they're all going to be in a show that opens tomorrow.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah. And along with that, right now, well, I've also been in the middle of the Saturn Neptune square has been right on my sun. So it's like these reinforcements of Neptune themes coming in, and I do feel really spacey, and but now I mean, and even more, I realize it even more so when you talk about what the disseminating, kind of confusion, waiting for the new.
Yeah. Well, that's a good example that we could sort of talk about with transits to what you're describing, because if you look at Sue's chart, you can see that obviously, yeah, Neptune is right on your midheaven right now, as well as the south node of the moon. And then you had that eclipse was right on you had a solar eclipse on your sun.
Yes, I did.
That was a very powerful solar eclipse. And then also Saturn squaring that, right?
Yes.
So you got Saturn squaring your midheaven, squaring your sun. And then so that the combination of that solar eclipse, and then would always be really powerful, but you'd want to see how this, bringing that in with the balsamic or the dark moon. So it just makes it much more powerful in this sort of clearing sense. And then is your north node 28 degrees of Pisces?
It's 28:30.
Okay, so then the lunar eclipse was on your nodes.
Yes.
And yeah, and then the Mercury Mercury retrograde, Mercury would unite with the sun right on your Saturn, and it's pretty much stationed direct on your IC. That's, you know, where it's at right now.
Yes, and actually my progressed Saturn is 28, or 28, between 28 and 29 Virgo. So yeah, it's like all Neptune, Saturn, Sun eclipsing, more Neptune.
Creating images and art and all of that is great for having Neptune on your midheaven, and then also even how you're describing all like this art show coming out, that goes really well with having those eclipses. I mean, you're completely plugged into the eclipses, and plus you have a Gemini moon like me, so Gemini moon, you're impacted by Mercury retrograde always, and then also it's been a pretty wild year for the mutable signs, right? So you got Gemini moon, Virgo sun, a lot of stuff's been happening.
And my Mercury is stationary retrograde.
Okay.
I mean, it went retrograde like a few hours before I was born.
Yeah, so it's really, I really love what you described about your so that whole idea of in your case, it's, you know, the loved ones as pets and these animals passing away, and then you've used that though to be creating all this art. So that's a really beautiful way to show that, and it's also kind of drawing in all of these themes of what's been going on that whole cycle up until now. And so, yeah, because you're in that balsamic dark moon phase, it's not really surprising at the same time that everything you've been wanting to have show up isn't yet, with, you know, with all the, I guess being an astrologer or Reiki or those different things you're mentioning.
Yeah.
But they definitely could be coming in with the new moon phase. You
That's
want to think about, yeah.
That's what I'm hoping.
Definitely. So then you'd really want to be setting up, and then you have a whole 30-year cycle coming in that could all be informing.
Yeah, exactly. I think we're just about done. So thank you so much, Gray.
Yeah, you're welcome. It's nice to meet you.
Yeah, it was nice to meet you too. Your Sun and Jupiter are right on my north node, so.
Yeah, I noticed that.
I love it.
Yeah, cool. Thank you, Linda.
Thanks, Gray.
Thank you, Linda.
Thanks, Gray.
Thank
Linda.
You,
Nice to see you.
Thank you. Always, Linda.
I guess we just...
Bye, everybody.